Welcome to the Eye of Power podcast. I'm your host, Tom Dardick. But this podcast is not about me. It's about you and your power. It's time to claim yours. It's my great pleasure to welcome Phebe Trotman to the Eye of Power podcast today. Phebe wrote the book, Never Quit on a Bad Day, which is pretty good advice, as you'll see in our conversation. One of the things I'll point out is she was able to give 5 pointers as to how we can become more coachable ourselves, which is an important part of our success journey, no matter what it is that you're doing. So help me welcome Phebe Trotman to the Eye of Power podcast. My first question for you, Phebe, first of all, thanks so much for being with us today, is I wanted to get a little bit of your path. Your book and your business is around the idea of never quit on a bad day, which I think is sage advice. But I know you have a celebrated sports career, soccer and coaching, and so I just wanted to kind of give us a brief run up to how you got to the place you are today.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Tom, for having me today. And it's been an interesting journey. When I look back on it, there's been a lot of twists, a lot of bumps, a lot of, little timeouts and reframes, if you will. But basically, I started playing soccer at a very young age, mostly because my older brother played, and I started on an all-boys team. So it was an interesting experience to kick off. I was the only person of color, a little girl on an all-boys team. But it was a great experience just to kick off my career because in some ways, I just loved the sport. For me, it was just being able to play. And I've been very fortunate to have an incredible career as an athlete. That being said, it wasn't always, national championships and MVPs. There was an experience where I didn't make a team and it was devastating, but I learned a lot from that. That has helped me later in years and throughout the rest of my career. From there, I was working full time. I always had little side businesses, and then I was laid off. So that was another big bump in the road. But it was a positive experience in that it really helped me become intentional about what I wanted my life to look like. And from that moment on, I was very intentional about building a business where I could operate it from anywhere because I wanted to have flexibility. I wanted to be there for my friends and family. And all this kind of has led on this path to writing a book. And because I've wanted to just help people realize that everybody has a journey, everybody has bumps in the road. And really, this book is all about the story behind the story, because I think oftentimes we see people and we see their highlight reel, not really knowing what they've gone through. And so I wanted to share a little bit of insight into that in hopes that it helps people along their journey as well, too.
So is that what you've noticed? And, when you've had your sort of high moments, people would come up and they'd see all the glory and sort of, they'd be happy for you, but we all sort of project ourselves, right? So they don't see the reps, the getting up, or I don't know what time you had to get up at times, but most successful athletes have to do incredibly hard things that most people really, they're not really that willing to do.
Absolutely, because it's not necessarily something you're talking about. It shows on the field. All the hard work you do outside of even your scheduled practices are what are going to translate into having success on the field. So I do think, and it is something that I've talked about it when it comes up, but it's not that that's necessarily what I always share is the down moments. But I do think it is important because there are a lot of times where you do see people, myself included, we see these, again, highlights, and you're like, wow, I want that. But it's also the question, are you willing to do what it takes to get to what that person has? And so just giving a little bit of insight into that. And I do think a lot of times people see my soccer career and they're like, oh, it must have just always been easy, not knowing that. No, there was a time where I cried for weeks because I didn't make a team. And there were times where I wasn't starting on the field. I was sitting on the bench and I wanted to get in that game. And what did I have to do as an athlete to get to be one of those impact players?
So that leads to a good segue into another question I have for you, Phebe, which is, the lessons that you take from the field, both as a player and a coach, and taking those and applying them to sort of the world of work. What are some of the top things that you find yourself, kind of extolling to people to say, these are the things I've learned that maybe it'll be a shortcut for you?
Absolutely. Well, I think a big one that right away top of mind is accountability, right? At the end of the day, looking in the mirror and having that conversation with yourself about, are you doing what it takes as an athlete? Are you doing what it takes as an entrepreneur to create the success that you want? Because, when I look back on my career, I talk about not making that team, and I was devastated. And I'm grateful to my parents because they kind of gave me that, okay, well, you can continue to cry about it, but that's not going to change what's happened. So what do you want to do differently? And in that, I realized, like, I wanted to be an impact player. I wanted to contribute. And so then it was like, well, what can I do to make sure that the next opportunity that comes, I am an athlete that the coaches are like, yes, we want her on our team. And that was my mentality. And so I took it on myself to do the extra work. And I believe if we can start being accountable versus looking outward and blaming other people, let's look inward and say, well, what can I do differently? If you're not having the results in your business that you would like to have, what can you change? Who can you learn from? Can you get a different coach or a new coach or hire a coach? Can you learn from other people who have gone before you, learn what they did? Because I truly believe success leaves clues. So learn from people who have what you would like to create and add that to your life. So accountability is just such a huge piece, I believe. And then having that resilient mindset of just continuing, keep going. There are going to be tough days. There are going to be days you want to quit, but that's kind of why the book, never quit on those bad days. Keep going. If you're going to quit something, quit on a good day. And, we do talk a little bit about that in the book as well, too.
I always think of Barry Sanders on that one, where he could have had a few more years of stellar performance, and he did a microphone drop basically on his career. That's remarkable because it's sort of rare, right? We
Mhm.
tend to hold on, and not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that either, but it's a hard thing to do, to sort of get over that headiness of success, right?
Mhm, mhm. And I think a big piece of it, again, it's not necessarily saying everyone has a journey in terms of when it's time to, if you will, transition into the next chapter of
Mm.
your life and the next phase of your life. And so it's a personal decision for sure. There's reasons behind why you might want to, look forward into something else and why you might be moving from that into the next phase. I think that key with the whole never quitting on a bad day is oftentimes when we quit something is because we're frustrated, we're disappointed, we didn't get the results we wanted, we think it's not fair, someone didn't treat us right, or there's all these different reasons. But a lot of times we quit things because we're frustrated. It's coming from a negative place
Mm.
versus pushing through that, getting to the other side, coming from a place of, if you're going to transition forward, have peace with it, because you're transitioning from a place of positive emotion where maybe it is time to move forward, right? In his case, maybe it was time to move forward into that next chapter for a variety of reasons. But again, it's making that decision when you're on a positive and you're filled with more positive emotions than making a decision from a negative place.
A couple of things that kind of resonate with what you're saying there, Phoebe, for me. One thing is, it seems like if we're going to have that accountability and overcome whatever sort of resistance to change we might have, it seems like you're highlighting the importance of relying on others, whether it be a professional coach or a mentor, some trusted advisor that can help us see our blind spots and help us get past those self-imposed barriers that got there however they got there. Is that
I agree. Yeah. And I mean, I've had coaches all my life, right? So from a very young age, starting soccer at 4, right through to now, I have coaches in various capacities and roles and mentors. And I truly believe it's important to surround yourself with great people, right? People who have gone through some stuff, because they can impart that wisdom and they can share their experience and they can, as you said, point out sometimes blind spots. I also think it's really important to have a great community of people, because here's the other piece too. And I've noticed this sometimes, we have, like, let's talk as entrepreneurs, right? We have friends and family who absolutely adore us. They love us. They want the best for us. That being said, if they're not an entrepreneur and you have a conversation with them about something that's tough that's happening in your business, because they've never gone through it as an entrepreneur, they may just share, like, okay, well, and I've had this happen personally where they're like, well, why don't you just go get a job? Like, that solves it, right? And they're coming from a place of love, right? They're coming from a place of protection. They want the best for you, and they're hearing you come from this, I'm frustrated because it's not happening fast enough, or whatever the emotion is. So are they the best person to turn to in that if you have a business issue, maybe not. Maybe they're there for the personal side, but maybe you go to someone, your coach, your mentor, a community who is in business, who can say, you know what, pat, not give you the pat on the back and be like, this is just part of it. Keep going. Right. Because I had that. I didn't have a huge business family community, if you will, but I had business contacts in a networking group. And I remember when I was going through tough times with my business and just being frustrated because it wasn't moving fast enough. And thankfully, I had that business community that I could share it with. And they're like, oh, keep going. You're fine. This is just part of it. Like, keep going, push through. What can you do differently? How do you move faster? And so I always encourage people, make sure you have great networks in your personal life to help you through your personal stuff, but also keep in mind professionals is very important as well, too.
So also it seems being choosy or discerning about who we're taking advice from. And I always think this is something that seems to be a recurring theme in a lot of conversations I have, which is the nature of trust.
Mm.
And just quickly, trust is twofold, right? It's the character side of you can trust the person, they want the best for you. And that's one element, but it's not enough by itself. You gave a good example of why, because your loved ones or the people that tell you to just stop that and go get a job, they think they're giving you the best thing, but the best advice, because they're putting themselves, if I was in her shoes, this is what I would do.
Mhm.
But the other side is competence, right? You have to know your stuff. So maybe you don't trust me to do your brain surgery, even though I want the best for you. I
It's very
might not be the
true.
best plan.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that. It's really true. Who are you taking advice from? It's like, I always say, like, do they have something that you want in life? Because if they do, they've gone through it and they can give you advice on it. But if they haven't, it's no fault of their own. Again, they're just coming from a place of love and protection, wanting what's best for you from, I love how you said it, from their lens, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, one benefit you have is in being somebody who's into sports and having those coaches, you learn from a young age how to be coached. There's a skill involved with that too, isn't there?
There is, there is. I think one of the greatest compliments you can give to a coach is they give you something to work on and you take it and you do it. I feel like that is just something as a coach now that it's so it means so much because and again, this is let's preface this by saying as well, great coaches who know their stuff, obviously. But when you have those coaches and they're sharing something to help you improve on your game or as an entrepreneur, whatever it is, when you listen to them, you actually hear what they're saying and then you implement it in your own life. I think is just it's the greatest gift back to that coach when you take that into and put it into practice.
So I've noticed that when you say, okay, well, why wouldn't you take that person's advice, especially in a case where you actually hire the person and maybe pay them a good amount of money and they're telling you something and then you don't do what they've said and then you think, okay, either they're wrong or I'm just cut out for failure or whatever. You have all this sort of problems that you accept as reality. What do you think goes on with people? What's your experience with getting people off the sandbar?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably a lot of layers there. I mean, sometimes it can just be your comfort zone, right? Because a coach is typically there. They're going to push you a little bit. They're going to help you again push through that and get on the other side. And a lot of times too, within our comfort zone, it's nerve-wracking if someone asks you to do something that you don't want to do and you have the alarm bells that go off that's like this is new, I don't know if I want to do it. So sometimes I believe that can hold us back because we're staying in our comfort zone. The one thing I do encourage people is, if you would have everything you already wanted if it was already inside your comfort zone. So everything that you want is going to be on the outside or you would have already had it. So I encourage you, to push through that. I do think it's okay to have a conversation with your coach as to why are you feeling blocked to do what your coach is suggesting, right? Find out why they're suggesting to do something. And if that result is what you're looking to do, then isn't it worth it just to go for it? Do it once, do it twice, do it for 30 days. And then if you're not seeing, or 3 months, depending what they're pushing, encouraging you to do, then you can always reevaluate it. So I do believe sometimes it's our comfort zone that puts us in there. The other thing I would say is if you're feeling resistance to what your coach is telling you, do you have that trust relationship with them, that you truly believe they have your best interests at heart? Because if you do, then hopefully you would see that they're telling you to do this to help you get the result that you're looking to get.
That makes sense. And so it's a matter of when the student's ready, the teacher appears, or allowing ourselves to be coachable. Sometimes we're in our own way, and maybe that's ego, maybe that's past traumas or vulnerabilities that we don't have the gumption to look at squarely in the face, possibly that
Mhm.
sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think it comes down to how bad do you want it? If you have
Yeah.
someone who's also giving you this wisdom, if you will, they've gone through it. They are someone who has the result that you've wanted to accomplish, and that's why you have them now. And they're telling you, okay, here's the recipe. Here's what, look at, follow these steps. And you're saying, well, hey, no, how badly do you truly want it? I think that's a question. And again, it comes down to that looking yourself in the mirror and having that tough conversation. And that's okay if now you're realizing maybe you don't want it as badly as you thought you did, and that's totally okay as well too. But then that's again having that conversation with yourself or and your coach to say, if it's not my comfort zone, if it's I do trust this person, and they have the result that I'm looking for and they're giving me great advice to help me get it, and I'm still not doing it, do I truly want this as badly as I think I want it?
You're giving me an idea here, Phoebe. I'm thinking in terms of if we could come up with a list of the attributes that would make somebody a good coachee. In other words, somebody that a coach would want to coach. We've touched on them already, but maybe it would be valuable to sort of tick them off.
Mhm.
So if we had like a list of 4 or 5 of those, what would be some of the top ones that come to your mind?
I would say wanting it, being hungry,
So
being
being
hungry,
hungry, like you just said, yeah, being
being
hungry.
hungry for it, whatever it is in that person's world and journey. Taking action, right? Taking action based on what that coach says. So being hungry is one thing, having that burning desire. Number two, then taking action based on what they said. Self-reflection / accountability. So being open to realize, like, hey, I didn't take as much action as I should have, and that's on me. So having those conversations and being okay with having that accountability on your with yourself as well too. Resilience, realizing that it's not, even when you're following, even when you're hungry, even when you're taking action based on what they said, it still might not go exactly as you want, but are you willing to get back up one more time? Every time you get knocked up, bounce back up. And then also, I think gratitude, being grateful that you have this, you're part of this journey, if you will, and finding the great parts in that journey, I think is a huge part. And I say grateful, but I also, that kind of rolls into just attitude, right? Having a positive attitude, realizing that it is a journey, finding the gems along the journey of whatever it is that you're looking to accomplish, because attitude's huge, and working with people who have a great attitude, realizing it's not always going to be easy. You may not get it as quickly as you want, but the growth in the journey and realizing that, I think, is a great part of, if you're going to work with someone, those are the type of people that I would love to work with.
Well, I think that is a wonderful list right off the top of your head. That's pretty impressive that you're able to do that. The one thing that I'm thinking about as a result of that is on the resilience side. It's kind of funny, some of the expectations we tend to formulate. Like, who thinks that you're going to be able to do something well the first time you do it, that you're never going to have any sort of setbacks, that everybody's going to do exactly what you want them to, that to think in terms of, to have a picture of a curve of success that means just nothing but going straight up, versus I tend to tell people, think of the stock market, right? Think of, like, there's going to be days where it's going to be awesome and it's going to suck and it's going to be up and down, and day to day you're not going to be able to tell what it's going to do, but over time you're hopefully seeing a trend up if it's a valuable investment, let's just say.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so
I love that you
if
say
you're a
that.
valuable investment, and if you are, because if you're focused on serving others, that's what value means, right?
Mhm.
So if you're focused on serving other people, that by definition makes you valuable. So if you're a valuable investment, then you should just expect that sort of path, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting because as you're saying that, like who goes in expecting that we're going to be great the first time, instant success, all this. I'm laughing because as you're saying it, it's so funny to me because I go into that still with new
Me
things that
too.
I'm like, "Oh, absolutely, I'm gonna crush it right away," and then it doesn't happen. Now I'm at a point where I accept that it's not gonna necessarily happen. I go in with the mentality of, "Oh, yeah, I'm gonna crush it," with the understanding that it doesn't work that way. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you might get into something new and create success right away, and that's great. However, a lot of times it's because 'cause you've had skills or stories or technique, things that you've brought from your past that come over that is applicable. But as so you're saying, it's so interesting how as humans, I feel like we naturally think that everything's going to just be, as you said, like a straight up, and it's not like that. So it's training ourselves to go in with that wanting to create success right away, with the understanding that there may be dips, and it's okay to have a dip because you're learning as you go.
Absolutely. And the piece that we sometimes lose sight of is, like, for me, I have a sort of a perfectionistic, right? So the eye of power, for instance, I want it to be so perfect and right out of the gate, and so that slows me down. And
Mhm.
so I actually do have a coach that's helping me say that you build it as you go, right? Don't
Yeah.
expect it to be something you're not going to change as soon as you learn something new. It's like, well, that makes sense. That's what I tell other people. Why don't I listen to that?
Totally, right? I know, it's having that conversation, the mirror talk, right? Mirror talk.
Exactly. So, I think that maybe that's a good way for us to wrap is no matter who you are, where you are in life, whether you're an acclaimed athlete like Phoebe or, somebody who's been in business for a long time by themselves or, whatever the heights that you've scaled, no matter what, we are all works in progress, right? We and so we just have a little bit of humility, a little bit of take a little bit of the air out, right? We don't have to be so serious, right? We
Mhm.
can we can laugh a little bit. We can laugh at our own foibles and that way allow ourselves to be vulnerable so that we can be um, more self-reflective and more resilient and really like ended up there more grateful for what
Mhm.
we do have.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
to have fun along the journey, right? And realize it is a journey. It is a journey, and to embrace it, find the great moments in it, and just realize, as long as you continue to put one foot in front of the other, just keep moving forward.
Well, I love that. You dropped a lot of wisdom on us there. I appreciate that, Phoebe. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Got any other thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
One thing I will leave everyone with, because I found it was transformational for myself very early on, is I set a calendar reminder in my phone. So every single day at 9:10 p.m. Pacific, a reminder pops up and it says, "I'm so happy and grateful that." And the reason I did that is this is years ago. Now gratitude is just part of my life. I wake up, I find moments throughout the day. I still have the calendar reminder, but I challenge people to do this. Set a calendar reminder, whatever time, day you want in your life, where you can have something that just pops up and it just forces you to stop for 2 minutes. Sometimes it's 10, it might be even 10 seconds, depending on where I'm at in the day. But it also just, again, helps you be intentional about finding gratitude. And I challenge people to do that. If you're not already finding moments to be grateful throughout the day, start with just one. But again, be intentional with it. So set that calendar reminder and just watch how you start to shift in terms of your perspective. And gratitude just helps you shift that perspective to be a little bit more positive. And so being intentional with it, I think I know helps, because that's something I did many, many years ago when I wasn't always finding moments to be grateful.
I love that. I'm smiling because one of my coaches, he called it his brag book, but every morning at 7 a.m. when I get up, first thing I do rather than look at the phone or email or anything like that, I get out my journal and write in my gratitude journal. And
Awesome.
some days it's like, I can't stop. Other days it's like, okay, can I write something new here? But for the most part, it's a great way to get yourself into that space. And I think that your idea of the reminder there is a really good one because you might catch yourself at a spot where it makes a big difference for you, right?
Absolutely. And I found that. And again, at the time when I first started this is, oh gosh, 20 years ago. It was a long time ago that I first started that. And because what gratitude, some days I'd be grateful, sometimes I was not, because business wasn't going as quickly as I would have wanted and planned. As we said, jump into business and we expect right away. So it forced me to be intentional with my gratitude. And I found, again, it doesn't change the situation, it just shifts your perspective. And when we can shift our perspective, incredible things can happen from there. So I encourage people to do it and just watch what happens in your day, especially like mine. I do it, before I'm going to bed. And then I do other things as well too now, but that's where I started. It was just something every single day it'd pop up and it just forced me to pause and be like, what am I grateful for today? So I'd love to hear from the community how it shifts in their life as well, because I do know it will help you tremendously along the journey.
Well, one thing I'm grateful for is your time and getting to know you a little bit better, Phebe, and the knowledge that you've been able to give to us today. Some big pearls of wisdom there, and so much, very much appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's been a pleasure. It's great to connect with you. And I just love everything that you're doing to just help and inspire and encourage. So keep up the great work.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Thank you for being my guest today, Phebe. I appreciate everything you shared with us today. A couple of things that I want to underscore are, I love when you said, paraphrasing a little, everything you want that you don't have is outside of your comfort zone. And we know that well in the Eye of Power community. That's related to the pain quadrant. And then another thing she said is, if you're struggling with taking direction, making those changes, to ask yourself, do you really trust that source, that whether it be a coach or a mentor or whoever it is you're listening to? How badly do you really want something is another way to go. Sure, just to recap the 5 things she identified that make people very good coachees: being hungry for whatever it is that the goal is, being action oriented, not thinking about it, not doing research, but actually taking the steps forward, the ability to self-reflect and be honest with ourselves. Number 4 was resilience, making sure that we can take a licking and keep on ticking, right? And number 5th, and perhaps the most important one, is fostering an attitude of gratitude. And she had a really good suggestion as to how we might do that by setting a calendar reminder, an alarm on your phone, something that comes up that just reminds you to ask, I'm so happy and grateful that, and you fill in the blank at the moment that alarm goes off. You can do it in written form. You can make a voice recording, whatever it is, making sure that we're in that place of gratitude. Another coach of mine, Mark von Musser, has said repeatedly now that gratitude is next door neighbors with prosperity, which makes a lot of sense. So I thought those were very good nuggets for our conversation today, and I was very thankful that Phebe Trotman was my guest today. Very nice to get to know her, and hope to see her again soon. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Let's go.
This has been the Eye of Power podcast with Tom Dardick. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd also like to thank my brother, Scott Dardick, for the music and his music production. If you'd like to reach me, simply email Tom at dardickcommunications.com.